Shift happens, sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance. And when it does, you have two options. You can either cling to the life you've outgrown or step into the version of you that knows she's meant for more. I'm Gia Lacqua, trauma-informed empowerment coach and founder of Radical Prioritization. Welcome to What the Shift, the podcast for women who've outgrown the life they've built and are ready to create one that finally fits. Here we get real about the shifts that change everything: identity shifts, career pivots, relationship resets, mindset breakthroughs, and learning how to finally release what's holding you back. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just be ready for what's next. It's time to shift. If you feel like life is shifting, you're in the right place. I'm Gia Lacqua, and welcome to What the Shift. Today, I am thrilled to introduce you to Barbara Burgess. She's an author, mother, executive, and unapologetic dark chocolate lover who's embraced the beautiful messiness of life. She founded Core Luma, Core meaning heart, Luma meaning light, a Chicago-based consulting firm, wrote and performed a one-woman show, The Extraordinary Experience of Being Ordinary, and most recently wrote her first book, Enough: Finding Peace in a World of Distractions, Hustle, and Expectations. Barbara, so happy to have you join us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's beautiful to be here.
I would love to hear more. So congratulations on your book.
Thank
Very
you.
exciting. I know you recently launched Enough and would love to dive into, what the book is about and what inspired you to write it. But before we do, just tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I feel like it's such a simple question and such a big one at the same time. I was just talking to a girlfriend before I dialed on here, and we were talking about the fact that we write these resumes and bios that are filled with all this corporate jargon. And the conversation we were having is how much I don't care about any of that, right? So it's a hard question to answer in the sense of, I've been in a lot of different industries, from a first job selling candy bars for Nestle Foods to helping Grainger.com launch their first website in those days. But, the most recent experience before I launched my own business was with a nonprofit doing leadership training and development for like 20 years. And, the big shift, I'll say, was when I left that organization because, for a lot of different reasons, but it was time for a change. And it was really in the stepping away from that. I was COO, and so I oversaw finances and HR and all those kinds of things. But, it was at a place where I kept trying to make change, and the change wasn't going to happen. It's asking the brick wall to move. And the combination of that, the combination of being a mom and having my kids be in the teenage years and being aware of the fact that, when they're littler, you can control where they are, what they're doing, and your time with them. When they're at this age, you catch them in the cracks, right? So I wanted to be around to catch them in the cracks. And also it was just time for something new. And so, I left that job, started my own business, doing what I knew to do. I knew how to do consulting and training and facilitation and executive coaching and all those things. But I think that's like the footer of the story, because really what happened under that umbrella of the new business was just possibilities that hadn't been there before. What happened were cracks in the concrete where all of a sudden I could be with myself at a deeper level, think about what mattered to me, use the business umbrella as a cheap excuse to care, contribute, and create, in ways that I hadn't anticipated. And so that's the real meat of the journey, which is where this book started, I say, writing itself in those cracks. And it's just been a beautiful kind of adventure since then in a way I don't think I could have anticipated probably even 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a great story. And I think it's a great point that, same thing on my side, where 5 years ago I had left the corporate world and never in a million years would have guessed that I would have written children's books and started a podcast and publishing, a self-help book. So it is fascinating what happens when you let go of the expectations and allow yourself to actually live and be.
Well, and I think also that there's such a, the theme I've been sitting with a lot lately are frameworks, and that I feel like personally I'm mourning not relationships, but frameworks that are dying, and not because they served me, but because they were familiar, right? And so in one of those frameworks, I would say, we have this framework that you pick something to do for a living, or you land in something, or you achieve something. And it's such a limited framework, right? I think maybe for some people that's easy. And, oh, I grew up, I always wanted to be a doctor. I studied, medicine. I went and I performed it. And now I've done that for 50 years, whatever. But that's not the majority of people that I know or meet. And I think it really limits and constrains the capacity we have for contribution on the planet. And so, to this point, like, why do we have to define ourselves? And I think there are more and more people, and particularly young people, who are like, yeah, I'm an artist and I'm an author and I'm a performer and I'm a writer and I'm a business person and that's what excites me, is that opportunity both for myself, but for the people I meet as well.
100%. It is so self-limiting, and it definitely limits our potential in the
Yeah.
world, so I couldn't agree with you more. And I love what you said about, the bios, and 'cause one of the questions, I ask clients is, "Well, who are you aside from the roles and the titles?" And
Mm,
sadly, most high achieving women don't know, and I
yeah.
was one of them. I
100%
was one of
guilty as
them.
charged.
Right? Guilty
Yeah.
as charged, I was there. But I think that's, the beauty of uncovering the layers and getting to the core of who you are underneath the roles and the
Well, I love, love, love that you asked that question. Like, I just am moved, because when I was talking to this friend this morning, one of the things I had said to her, because I had just had to submit for a proposal, I had to submit an updated CV, and it is just filled with jargon and stuff, and
Right.
there's this part of me that knows that's what you need to do the gig, and then there's this other part of me that it just rubs me right. And so I said to her, I said, I think I'm going to go write my bio in the most authentic, honest way I possibly can, with no one's expectations, right? And so have literally this morning been in this inquiry of like, okay, who am I, regardless of anything anybody's ever asked, but like at the core, like, I think of myself more like an contemplative. Like, we don't get
Mm,
to have a bucket like that feels important, but I love the big mysteries of life. I love wondering about them. I love exploring and going down holes about them. I love learning about people, but it's those frameworks again that, it doesn't fit into a bucket that we have, it's something we might describe people post mortem. They were
right.
also a contemplative or whatever it
In
was.
your obituary.
Yes, right? But so I love that you asked that question, because I
Yeah.
literally think I'm gonna do that exercise for myself.
It
Um,
it's amazing. It truly is amazing because we don't know until
yeah,
we, stop and ask ourselves, and
yeah.
it's kinda crazy. Absolutely. Tell us what led you to write your book Enough, and, a little bit about the book.
I think the initiative, the main, starting point was really, there's a story I tell in chapter 1, and it was based on this, experience I had with chalk on our sidewalk. I live in the city in Chicago, and, I had literally just been, like, cleaning out some stuff. I had left my job, I'd started the new company, and, I was, cleaning out old kids' sidewalk chalk, and I put it outside in a jar, and I just wrote on the sidewalk, "Please write, chalk, or draw." And it was just really to kinda, like, move it out, use it, etcetera. And, it was the first day that I was doing that, and I'm sitting on my porch typing on my laptop, but we have a deep porch, so, like, you can't see me from the sidewalk. And, you could hear this little boy walking with his parent like, "Oh, ma, can we all that kinda stuff, and it was just dear and sweet, and you could tell, like, again, I'm a parent, so I was like, she didn't wanna stop. But eventually, like, the unrelenting request, she gave in, and, you could just hear this little boy sitting there, like, talking to himself in the sweetest, most melodic way, like, "Oh, a little blue here, a little, sketch there." And when I had put the chalk out, one of the things I had done is I had drawn these just colorful kind of orbs, these circles, just to get the ball rolling. And so, I'm listening, and I didn't want to like interrupt their space, because eventually the mom was like, "Oh, honey, that's sweet." It was just like, listening to a gorgeous song. And so, but eventually, like, I didn't hear them making noise anymore. And I thought, oh, I'm going to pop down and see what's there. And I'm, assuming what I'm going to see is like a scribble, that looks like a dog that, only a parent could identify or appreciate. And so I walked down to the sidewalk, and what I see, I literally stopped in my tracks, and physically stopped in my tracks and was moved to tears. This boy had taken those colorful circles I did, and he had made rings around the planets, and he had turned the whole thing into like a beautiful, sky, a beautiful universal planetary setting. And I was like, just moved, humbled, all the things. And again, my experience was, it reminded me when I first saw those pictures from space from the Hubble telescope, and like how that's gorgeous artwork. Like, it's just an amazing thing. And so in that moment, the felt sense, the body experience I had was what I would consider the sense of enough. And in the book, she's a character and not enough is a character. Like, they both, kind of enter my life in a real clear way. And so my felt sense in that moment on the sidewalk was like I was being hugged. Like, I literally felt that, kind of like my heartbeat slowed, time stopped, and I had tears coming down my face. And so it was just this profound embodied sense of enough and enoughness. And then she like was around, it was like I'd be having these different moments, and like her presence was there, like a real presence. And then in contrast to that, of course, not enough would be there as well, like when I would catch myself comparing myself to somebody else or whatever. But because these individuals became characters in my life, it started a journey, that lasted, well, keeps going on today, but began. And just started capturing the stories, is really what happened for the book. So it was like, on both sides, experiences with enough, experiences with not enough. And so the book ended up becoming just sort of what my journey was, along with, some lessons that got enfolded into that. So yeah, that's how the whole thing got kicked off.
Oh, that's such a beautiful, beautiful story. I love that. It's those moments in life that make you pause and really stop to reflect, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible. Incredible. So I love how you made enough and not enough characters in the story. Talk to us a little bit about, so our audience of high achieving women, I have no doubt most, if not all, have their own enough and not enough. But tell us, for you, what does it mean and what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll start with not enough because uh he's clear to me in a really concrete way, in the sense that it's every one of those places that, we've overwritten about imposter syndrome, but it's because it's still true, right? It's the all of a sudden I'm measuring myself against somebody else and I find myself lacking. It's the critiques, it's that self-dialogue, it's the who do you think you are? It's all of that kind of rigmarole. And what was great about him becoming a character is where that was living inside myself, I was able actually to pull it out and put it out there and understand that is a character, but that's not me. Those are thoughts I may have, but they're not me. Right. And again, in a framework perspective, I think too much of our lives are structured around that kind of comparison, what that looks like in that framework. So he became a character that was outside of me that I could notice. And again, it's not hard to notice when I would start feeling down, I'd track back to those not enough thoughts. And it was like he was whispering in my ear and I could tell him to go do something else. Right. And then enough for me, like my belief on it is it's for everybody. I think it's a really personalized, description or experience. Like, I don't believe how I might describe enough might be how you do or how anybody else does. But if I were to characterize it for myself, I would say it's as if I could change nothing right now. I couldn't get thinner, make more money, do anything. I just was as I am. And that all of the voices would be saying, fabulous, magnificent, wonderful. Like, with all my quote unquote successes, all my failures, all my flops, all my inadequacies, that the primary voice of enough would say, perfect, right? Just as it is. And oh, by the way, if you want to change any of those things, feel free. But you changing those things doesn't make you any more enough. Like, you're impeccable the way you are just the second.
It sounds amazing. It sounds, I will say, probably for some of our listeners, the question is, well, how do we do that? Right?
Yeah.
Because it seems so, I don't know, unrealistic, unattainable, maybe if we're not there yet. So what advice would you give to women listening? What are the ways that we can stop listening
Yeah.
to the not enough voice?
Well, and I always say, like, it's not that the not enough voice goes away for me. I just turn down the volume, is what the journey has been for me, right? So, but I do think it helps to literally turn him, them, it, whatever into a character. I think it helps to, like, I've talked to some people who've given it a name, Joe or Harry or whatever. There he is again, right? I think that really is useful because I do think it's really essential to separate the voice from me in a significant way, to really pull it out and look at it. So I think that's a clear step anybody could do. And I don't think that one's hard, right? We all know that chatter. It's just going, okay, let's give it a character and let's picture it and let's see what it's like and
Yeah,
let's name that.
externalize it.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And then to me, the other piece of it, and it's again tracking back to these subtle things I started doing, but I started writing down the moments of enough in a journal, right? Now, again, I know everybody talks about gratitude and being journaling for what you're grateful for. I think it's just a version of that in some ways. But for me, that can be hard sometimes because I have this whole moralistic overlay. Like, oh, you should be grateful for what you have. But I'm like, but I'm mad about what's here. Right. So it wasn't that kind of, moral piece, but I started just jotting down these what I think we would all consider small moments that are glorious moments, right? I wouldn't have had I not created the crack in my life. I don't think I would have been present enough to notice this child and what happened there. I don't think I would have even been tuned in, right? And so I think to honor the little things that are going well, it's literally like scanning for what's working. It's scanning for the beauty. It's scanning for those things because I think with both of them, the first game is being aware. The first game isn't some transformational, oh, I'm floating in heaven's bliss now. Like, no, I will, a week ago, I hit a dark space of not enough again. It's just that I noticed, right? And I'm like, oh, there you are. And I don't have to indulge it like I used to. I don't have to listen as if it's true. I can make a distinction and a separation. And beyond that, to me, once we're into that identification and awareness and really, marking those moments, it's muscle, right? Like I don't think there's magic. There's nothing new under the sun in any concepts or ideas, but I go practice it again and again and again so that the things that were a big deal before are less of a big deal. And so it's wondrous and it's not magic, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's so beautifully stated. And I love how you talk about the crack. I'd like to say the crack is where the light comes in, right?
Well, and to your point, a lot of this was in retrospect, looking
Yeah.
at how did this moment come to be. I don't think it would have come to be had I been living the life I was living before at that other job because I was really distracting myself with all that busyness. And I think without feeling a sense of enoughness in the way that I do now, I was saying yes to all kinds of things that didn't serve me. I guess, again, filling the time with lots of what we know to be the shoulds and the oughta and the if only I. And so I do think the like, if we're going to let the light in, we need to make the crack. you know?
Absolutely. And you talk a lot about hustle culture and busyness. I talk about the busyness cycle and how it actually is an acceptable form of addiction.
Oh my God. This is so funny. So I love that you say that. I was teaching an emotional intelligence workshop last week, a 2-day workshop, and we started talking about this piece of it. And I literally said to this room of people, I said, listen, to be clear, I'm an addict. I mean, I
Yeah.
literally said those words. And so it's not like, again, as an addict, you don't just stop being an addict. You
Yes.
just become aware and try not to fall down the slippery slope.
Recovering addict.
I'm a recovering addict. I love that.
Recovering addict.
Yes.
100%. So, and it is very, very common with high achieving
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
And so we fall into that trap and the hustle culture. And
Yeah.
I think the most important lesson that I learned, having also being a recovering addict, is that when your energy is everywhere,
Mhm.
your presence is no.
Mm.
And you alluded to the presence part before of like being there, being present, being able to actually take in what's going on around you. So, when you think about your book, how
Mhm.
would you say it challenges the hustle culture, especially for women who were raised to believe that, we have to achieve our worth?
Yeah. Well, there's a whole section I have in there about proving myself, right? And I think again, it the challenges to the framework. So the framework is if I fill in the blank, then I'll right matter be enough, whatever it is. And I think there's a certain amount of experiences and wisdom you gain where you realize that is not a direct correlation formula. And so instead, it's like why not go directly for the goodies? Why not go directly for that feeling of love, happiness, satisfaction, whatever it is? But then we need tools and frameworks in order to do that. And I love that quote you just said. That just made me want to cry. Like, I hope that's going to be in your future book because that is, I will quote that one all day long. But I think it's true in the sense that, we are living in games that we did not design, right? And that's a beautiful quote from Margaret Heffernan. I don't know the exact wording of it, but who wrote the book Uncharted and Women on Top, where she talks about receiving this award and really realizing all this time I had been playing a man's game and I didn't know what my own game was. And so I think about that game metaphor a lot like, what is the framework I'm trying to win in? You know? And it's one framework. There are thousands of them, right? So I can do that if I choose. Is that the most fulfilling, satisfying, delightful? Do I feel like I often play the game of like fast forwarding to the end of days? Will I have been like so deliciously delighted that I did whatever that next achievement was or not, right? And so in that piece of it, the deeper inquiries I've been in, it is what is my game? What is my value set? What is my framework, right? And so, if I'm at that moment, I really do want to be able to say, if I'm looking back on my life, like, did I make contact? Did I love? Did I serve? Did I experience it? Did I risk? Did I play? Did I try? Did I enjoy? Did I like those are the questions, right? So if that's the game I get to set up, it's a different way to measure and judge. So for the high achieving woman, we like to measure and judge. Fine. Let's just rechannel that in a different direction. So do you want to, measure and judge yourself against an external traditional patriarchy system that you never set up and wouldn't design if you were going from scratch? It's a choice, but just know it's one of many, many choices. Or do you want to design your own game and then measure yourself against that? And I think that's the thing that I get the most satisfaction from now is when I know I'm in that lane of playing my game, being myself, contributing regardless of what those other frameworks are doing or saying.
Yeah. It's so beautifully stated. And I think a lot of us get stuck in that one framework that we were told
Yeah.
or taught. That
Well,
is
and
the one we need
shown
to follow,
over
and
and over and
shown,
over
yes,
again.
that
Yeah.
we are supposed to follow. So then to break out of that, it becomes, as you well know, very, very challenging, but also incredibly powerful and liberating.
Well, and I think going back to what you're saying about practical tips and things you can do, I think one of
Yeah.
the most important things people can do is like listen to podcasts like this, but get a woman or two, get a person or two around you who at least is the wind beneath your wings to support you in believing what you believe. Because I think when all the other voices are drowning that out and trying to tell you, you need that one place you can go to and say, hey, this is how I look at it. And they're literally like Tinkerbell, like, I believe, because I think we need that reinforcement because we
Yeah.
have all these other messages bombarding us and reinforcing from other spaces.
And I think it's great advice and also important to note that, and I've experienced this in my own journey, your Tinkerbell may not be who you think it is.
And it probably isn't.
It probably isn't, which is hard too, because you think the
Yes.
people you're closest to are gonna be your biggest supporters, and that is just not always the case.
Not the case. Yeah. And
They want the version of you that they know, and
that
if
they're familiar with.
they're familiar with and they're
Yeah.
comfortable with, and if
Yeah.
you're gonna change, what does that mean for them? So I think it's also important to look outside of your immediate circle for those people.
Well, and I think again, in if we're defining the game, then we're also defining how we measure, right? And so I'm continually in that process, even right now. Friends I've known for forever, like, is this a supportive fit? Is this the right fit? In what ways? What's the nuance? Like, that's an ongoing journey for me. But what I
Yeah.
know is I have better ways to measure. And so, like, if I'm going to coffee with somebody and I leave and my heart feels more open, more uplifted, more empowered, more optimistic,
Right.
that was a good sync fit. And if it doesn't, no matter what my logical brain wants to tell me, I need to trust the embodied wisdom that's in my physicality, right? If I feel less than or like I gave a lot and didn't receive anything, like it's forcing me to have some critical thinking about some relationships that on the surface and that everybody else would say, well, what's your problem? And why don't you blah, blah, blah? And my only answer can be because my body says so. And that's my measuring stick now, right? But not the obvious ones, to your point.
Because we were taught to measure with logic, our
Yeah.
intellectual brain, what we were taught, and not our heart and not our gut. And we've learned to suppress those signals and the alarms. And so many women I believe get stuck in that process of, this is what I was told to do, this is what I'm supposed to do, and ignore those other signs and symptoms. So I love how you talk about that inner wisdom and knowing.
Well, and to name, like, this is why I love teaching emotional intelligence right now, because the parts I lean into stronger, and this is what the most recent research is saying, right? So, research tells us that our body will be aware of a decision 2 to 7 seconds before a head, right? The research is showing that our gut has 500 million neurons. Our brain has neurons, our gut has neurons, our heart has neurons, right? The research is showing that oftentimes, like the most cutting edge stuff is showing that sometimes those bodily decisions that we make are more effective and accurate than our cognitive ones. And it's not to divorce ourselves from our brains, but there is continuous emerging research on how much data we're receiving into our bodies. And so to me, when I'm teaching emotional intelligence, that's what I love teaching is saying, listen, you have this amazing, like German engineered GPS instrument right here at your disposal. And to your point, we have been taught to completely ignore it. Yet in any high achieving space we'd in, we would never say, hey, I'm going to eliminate 50% of the data input for my decision. I'm just going to take out of this whole field of data, I'm just going to take 50% of it and use that. Doesn't that make sense? No, it's not logical. It's not scientific. It doesn't make sense, but it's what we do. And we become a walking head and we tune out really, really immense, beautiful wisdom.
Absolutely. So true. And learning to tap back into that takes some work.
Yes, some practice.
Some practice. So, Barbara, tell us what would you say when you talk about the version of you that used to prove, was
Mhm,
the prover?
mhm.
What identity did you have to let go of in order for you to step into the version of you that we are talking to today?
I would say still an active process, right? So, some of what I've been saying is I think when I published the book was when the moment it really started teaching me deeply. So this is not like, oh, I've got this handled, let me tell you, perfectly, because the difference in that proving, just like the not enough, is the catching it and noticing it. So the proving part of me is the one that's trying to um, measure myself by the framework that exists. So traditional, again, patriarchal, high achieving mindset. So how much money, how many widgets, how many whatever. And by the way, I love money and widgets and all the things, but it's not the way to measure the worth, right? So I literally have had this experience, and I write about this in the book. When I was writing it, I went to lunch with this woman, and we were catching up. It was a networking contact, and I left that meeting, and I felt empty and a little bit down. And I was like, "Oh, what's going on with you?" And I realized I had spent the lunch doing that proving thing. So it was like reverse bragging, name dropping, all the subtle things we're trained to do to validate ourselves. And I had missed the opportunity to be present and to be really curious about myself and her in this next phase of life. And so it's literally just catching what that feels like and going, "Oh, there you are, honey," and having a ton of compassion. Like, I totally get it. Like, I've done that for 5 decades. That makes sense that that's what you do. But reminding myself, hey, next time you're at lunch, we don't need to do that. We don't need to bring the resume, the proof, any of that stuff. It's not important. It's not our value set. It's not the game we're playing. That may come up, but if it comes up, it comes up, not as a way to, have my self-importance. So to that point, like this is not something solved for me. It's an active relationship with noticing when I start to do that and choosing a different route.
Absolutely. I love the way you describe that. So powerful. And what would you say is the one thing or the one shift that changed everything for you?
I think the big thing was, and I'm going to go back to kind of your quote, is making the crack, right? However that looks, so that the light can come in. So, um, in the sense of we need that momentary pause, whether it's long or short, to
Mhm.
say, to literally be with ourselves and say, what am I doing? And why am I doing it? And to what end? Right. And let me notice all of the inhibitions to being in an honest dialogue about that piece of it. But I think without having had that crack, I don't know that I would have been reflective enough for all of the rest of the wonder that came afterward.
So hard for women to do. Any advice that you want to leave the women listening with in terms of, saying, yeah, I want to slow down or I need that stillness? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to the finding a friend moment, but give yourself permission to think radically, revolutionarily, right? About, if you were starting the world from scratch, if you were designing lives from scratch, if you were building communities from scratch, and none of the rules were on, how would you do it? And then, using that as a compass to, measure against and being willing to even step into thinking about the fact that that's possible, like as is a radical move in itself to say, hey, even though I have all of these frameworks, I've been raised with them, that was the whole time, I could do something else. There is another possible way, and whatever that might be.
Yeah. Incredible insight and getting curious with what it could be for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
love it. Such great advice. Barbara, I want to just before we wrap, where can our listeners find you, connect with you, and purchase a copy of your book?
Yeah, lovely. So the book, search for Enough by Barbara Burgess, but on Amazon, on barnesandnoble.com, all the usual places for books. And then if you want to learn more or sign up for kind of a weekly little inspiration, beenough.com is a, subset in my website, but beenough.com, and it will talk about the book as well.
Amazing. I want to thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your insights, your expertise, and your story.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. We will see you next week. Now go make shift happen. Take care.
All right, shifter, that's a wrap on today's episode of What the Shift. But here's the thing, awareness is just the first step. The real shift happens when you decide to do something with it. So before you go back to business as usual, ask yourself, what is one thing you are done carrying? What's one shift you're ready to make? And if this episode hit home, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and send it to a woman who needs to hear this, because we shift together. Remember, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to take the next step. And I'll be right here next week, ready to shift with you. This is What the Shift, and we are just getting started.